Welcome back to another episode of Wise Words Book Summaries. And today we're reviewing another habit book, Elastic Habits by Stephen Guise, or Gaze. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Guise, I would assume.
Yeah, I would assume so.
And this is a book I guess I read a long time ago, but you've just finished it, right?
Yeah, I remember you telling me about it at the time, and I just never really got around to it. But seeing as we're ticking off all the habit books, it seemed fitting, didn't it?
It does seem fitting, and I think what I particularly like about this habit book is it's a bit different to the other ones in a sense. In regards to the other ones, all seem to have the sort of same habit models. They offer tips and tricks in terms of, changing your environment, changing your cues, etc. Whereas this one had a new sort of premise, which is having lateral and vertical parts to your habits, which we'll get into in more depth in a minute. But I really thought it was quite a unique approach to habits, which I think he's probably one of the first people to sort of bring it up. I think he's even created his own habit system that he tries to sell as like a PDF or sort of like a board pack. But I really like the idea when I read it, and I realized there's and we were just talking before this before we started recording about how we've managed to even incorporate some of these sort of like tips and tricks in the last couple of days to sort of excuse the fact that we're not going to do a full habit we wanted to do and just do like a mini habit. But yeah,
and I think it's kind of funny because I think we all kind of do it. Anyone who does habits or tracks habits, but we do it like unintentionally. We just do it like, oh God, today I had a really bad day, so I'm just gonna do this, but I'm still showing up. But we don't think that there's like a methodology behind it, and that's what he kind of gets across in the book. And I'd say what I quite liked about it was that, in all these other habit books, they talk about willpower and how you can't rely on willpower and how realistically you just design your environment. And that's the kind of like solution. But this is also another solution in that regard, as in like it takes into consideration your state and your like environment and context. And that's kind of like, I thought that was quite interesting.
I was just going to add that it's a bit more of a flexible habit-based system, because I mean a lot of the stuff we've been discussing before, the habits, is like you pick your habit. I mean, they have some of the other stuff we have been talking about does say like, maybe reduce your habit to the smallest possible action. But this is more of a systematic approach to that. And like I said, it adds a bit more flexibility. Whereas in the other habit books, it's like pick a habit and then stick to doing that habit. This one kind of says a habit usually has like a goal such as health, let's just say. And then it's a case of finding multiple habits that all go towards the aim of health. And there you get to pick and choose between the habits depending upon the situation, right? So for example, let's just say you wanted to do more sport or do more exercise. You would realize that, okay, fine, you want to go to the gym more, but then there's also other things which help you achieve the same goal, such as playing, I don't know, tennis, football, etc., or anything like that. Even going for like a brisk walk, I guess, so to speak, would count as that. And this is where the idea of these sort of like lateral based habits come in, where you can choose multiple habits which kind of achieve the same thing. Because if you really think about it as well, with these habits, they always kind of fall within the sort of same main categories of like, get healthier, get fitter, earn more money, develop certain things, or develop certain areas of your life. And therefore there's multiple ways to achieve these like sort of broader goals in just one habit.
Exactly. And I think we literally have talked about that before, not in relation to elastic habits, obviously. And like you said, this is basically a systematic kind of approach to that. So yeah, we have talked about it, I think, even from when we were doing the Atomic Habits podcast. But so it's just interesting how kind of like intuitive it is, and how kind of like natural it is, a natural kind of progression sometimes when life throws shit at you and you have to kind of adapt. And that's basically the crux of it, isn't it? It's like habits that can adapt to life.
Elastic habits, right? That's the whole
elastic
point,
habits, yeah, exactly.
Stretch and they come back.
Yeah.
I think that was the analogy used the least.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, should we get into it then?
Yes.
All right, so Just starting off with the intro. So great strategies are scalable to all levels. Although we may have the desire to see something through, if we don't have the belief that we can actually do it, we are unlikely to succeed. By creating an environment that restricts our options to only good ones and ones that benefit our goals and allow us to become the person we want to be. So that's kind of just an intro into habits in general, isn't it? Just the idea of like how beneficial they can be for us. So then part 1. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, go for it. So death to rigidity and long live freedom. So this strategy is engineered to work with your thought patterns, whether they're positive, negative, or neutral. Your habits need to be adaptable to not only your environment, which is what we're just saying, but also your state of mind. Although there are consistent patterns that emerge in our lives, there are many times where life is unpredictable and surprising. This calls for us to be able to thrive in a fluid, ever-changing environment. For too long, we have set rigid goals trying to do the exact same action regardless of the conditions we face. We do it in the name of grit, in the name of consistency and habit formation, or in the name of being courageous or persistent. The idea is not that we must Sorry, what?
I know, I was just going to say, I thought that was quite interesting, taking a different take on like resilience and grit. And, you know, we can... like I think that those are all like good qualities to strive for, but I think people can purposely make things much harder for themselves just so that they can almost, it's like pseudo resilience. It's like, I'm going to put something in the way, make more conflict or friction so I can be like more resilient. But actually, if the whole purpose is to like achieve or succeed at something, then you could do that in a much better way, and still build those kind of qualities in a different way.
I think as well, part of this like grit stuff is if you see yourself as a gritty person and you fail doing one of the habits, you kind of then beat yourself up a bit as well. If you kind of get what I mean, it's quite, it's not ideal if you feel like you're not gritty enough, if you can't stick to the habit, etc. So what we got here. So the idea is not that we must consciously decide everything we do, is that we can give ourselves the option to shift the goal when the circumstances come for it. And this is probably one of the key points, isn't it, in this whole entire book? It's what we were saying before the podcast, which is there's times of the day when you really don't feel like doing something, and it can even be you wake up after a bad night's sleep and you really don't fancy doing the habit that you said you're going to do, such as, I don't know, go for a 10-kilometer run. So therefore you got to have something which can adapt to that situation and still allow you to do something positive towards your health goal, which was related to running, but at the same time be less of a chore, less of a, what's the word, like when you perceive something to be like painful, like I guess less daunting, like you can say. A bit like one of the first things you said at the beginning was like this idea of belief that you can do it. I guess if you're feeling you're feeling really tired, right? Let's just say you wake up and you're like, oh, I just don't feel like I can go to the gym today. You don't think it's possible. Therefore, the situation calls for an adaptation, which is fine. Maybe I can't run 10 kilometers today, but maybe I can still run 2 kilometers. And then all of a sudden, you're probably going to feel a burst of motivation because you're like, oh shit, well, I can do that. That's going to be fine. And then you're still also achieving the same sort of, maybe not, you could argue the same absolute health benefit because you're not running for as long, but you're still working towards being a healthier person. You're still doing something, and therefore that's a win.
Exactly. And I think, at the end of the day, you're still working on those kind of neurological pathways. If you're still doing it, if you're still going to the gym, even if the intensity isn't there, you're still contributing to that neural pathway. If you do anything more and beyond that, then that's a plus. But actually, you're still doing it, right? So I think, like you said, that is a win. Anything above that is, it's like I said, it's a plus. But
you're still taking action. You're still doing like the habit. You're just doing like a reduced version of it.
Exactly.
So then we've assumed that we must find the Goldilocks spot for our habits and goals, the one spot that isn't too easy or too hard and just rewarding enough. But that spot moves every day. Discipline is what authority figures do to guide us or to keep us in check. However, this may include imposing external demands that do not necessarily suit our circumstances. Some people are able to internalize discipline into self-discipline, thus taking the freedom of choice away from their authority and instead using it to take control of their lives and become the kind of person they wanted to be. By feeling like we have control, we are much more likely to make decisions that are in our best interest. No one knows ourselves better than we do. Well, that's quite an interesting part here as well.
I when I was doing these notes, I was going through that and I was trying to like just make it make sense in my head. And I did think it was quite good, as in, you know, when we're brought up, people do things for us, or they tell us to do certain things because that's how a lot of people do it, and they normally achieve success that way. But as we grow older and we become more of ourselves and we become more unique, we need to figure out ways of doing what is best for us. And obviously in the context of these habits, it's like someone can't know our internal mindset or our internal state. They can't know how the environment is affecting us at this current point in time. So we need to be able to take control, not do something that someone else has said. And there are, you know, like we were saying, I think before this call, like, you know, we have talked about a lot of these other books and they do say this is the habit, but it's very rigid, right? And so you do need that flexibility so that you can take control and be like, okay, I need the freedom to be able to say when I can't do this, but I can still do this. And yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
I think also with the whole idea of like being rigid with it, you kind of then beat yourself up when you don't achieve Absolutely. It. You're like, oh, I failed the standard that I set myself. But the reality is you could have done something smaller and you still could have made progress towards the goal you were trying to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I quite like this bit as well. You need to like and respect what you're doing and all it entails. So if you want to keep doing something for weeks, months, and years, it means that you can't feel like a slave to your goals. You must feel like and be the master. What the slaves always want, freedom from whatever enslaves them. However, a lot of us don't know what to do with freedom. Instead, we resort to comforts and indulgences, which end up becoming bad habits. But by practicing using this freedom, we can hone our ability to use it for our benefit.
I thought that was another, that was kind of my interpretation of it, at least. Just that, you know, let's say you didn't have any habits yet and you had this surplus of freedom to apply, you know, your attention to doing things that are eventually going to be habits. And if we just don't know where to start, if we don't know what's healthy, or we don't know like what are good things to like act as that habitual kind of default mode, then I think it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and then resort to comforts, right? It's like, oh, there's too much anxiety, or it's too overwhelming to think about what kind of habits I should follow. I'm just going to do this instead. And I think if you have a framework that you can follow, then it provides it, you know, then you can apply that, and over time then you can make that your own, right? It's the same thing with what we were just talking about, as in the authority giving you something, and then over time you take that, you make it your own, and then you can apply it to whatever habit you want. And in this regard, obviously it's the Elastic Habits framework, but I just thought that was an interesting take.
Yeah, I like it. What do we have here in this green little bit here as well? Does that relate to it too?
This was just something that I had a thought about. So what does it say? When we choose an ideal type of person to be like, we are going against the grain. We are setting up goals that go against our old behavior that we want to change. And we are restricted to some degree by the conflict between our old behavior and our new behavior. So I think I kind of took this as there's always going to be a bit of friction, you know, taking on that self-discipline and taking on that control. But over time, we'll start to feel more accustomed to it and kind of want to just maintain it as it like becomes part of you. I can't remember the direct link to that, but yeah, something along that.
It does make sense that you're always trapped between, you know, your old patterns and the new patterns you want. I remember hearing like the Peterson interpretation of like the devil was being like this idea that there's the twin nature of yourself, the thing that's always like battling you. Like you're always in a battle with yourself, and it's like the two natures, like the more positive, I'm going to go forward, and the sort of the devil attitude, which is like, oh no, you can eat that fruit, you can do this, you don't have to, you know, you don't have to do this effort, you can just relax. But yeah, that's kind of the parallel draw between that.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm trying to remember it now, is the idea that once you have achieved these habits, you have then therefore more freedom relating to like what you can apply to, for instance, like conscious control over trying to build another one elsewhere. But it's just the idea that, like, you know, once you get to that stage, you then release that freedom because now it's automated. Yeah. So part 2.
Yeah.
All right. So elasticity and flexibility. So elasticity, as the definition, is the quality or state of being elastic, such as the capability of a strained body to recover its size and shape after deformation. Resilience, the quality of being adaptable. One of the best synonyms for elastic is resilient. Elasticity is not only about increasing flexibility, it's about increasing resilience to pressure. 4 reasons why flexibility can provide strength and resilience. So one is it provides multiple routes. So multiple routes are better than one. Those without flexibility depend on one route to do the job, whatever it may be. One route works great until it dies. Multiple routes keep people and trees alike grounded, strong and far more resilient to adversity. So number 2, flexibility enables improvisation. So by embracing flexibility, you will find more ways to succeed through improvisation. The more you're able to improvise, the more proactive and resilient you will be. Number 3, flexibility opens your eyes to opportunities. So if you have flexibility in your arsenal from the start, you will gain a wider field of vision to better anticipate incoming threats and opportunities in your life. And number 4, flexibility lets you allocate resources more efficiently and boosts your sense of freedom. You can flex and bend your goals to whatever suits you best on that day. I do think that these 4 kind of points are quite poignant because they're obviously, it's not just about habits, it's kind of fundamentals in life, isn't it? Life is always fluid and flowing, and you can't be rigid. Otherwise, you will create resistance. And so it's being able to adapt to whatever circumstance comes your way.
Yeah, I was even going to add, it's like, if you go into a negotiation or a negotiation where you want something, if you only have one thing you want, you're pretty inflexible and rigid, and there's only one way this negotiation or debate's going to go, and it has to be the way you want it, otherwise you're losing. Whereas if you come in with a more flexible mindset and you're like, well, actually, I want multiple things from this interaction. I'm not just set up with this one thing. I have flexible goals. I have things that I might want apart from this one thing, having multiple routes, so to speak. You're going to be a lot better in negotiating and stuff because you have more flexibility to maneuver around what the other person wants as well.
Absolutely.
And
and I did quite like the point that, it provides you, first of all, it changes your perception of reality because you can be more open. If you know that, you don't have to stay in one place, then you can be open to more opportunities. It changes your field of vision, literally. And that, because it's able to change your field of vision, you can then change how you would interact with things. Because it's you're not so restricted, basically.
Yeah. I was going to say you can use more real life examples as well, not just for habits. So I'll give you one as well, which is with the new gym sort of Notion thing I have, where I have multiple exercises to choose from in like a workout template or whatever. It allows me then to be flexible in when I'm in the gym to okay, this machine, people are using it, but I already have a ready-made exercise which sort of slots nicely into this position anyway. So I'll just do this one instead today. And it allows me to not be stressed in the gym either. And then also not slack, because some people might be like, oh, I can't do that exercise today, so I'm not gonna do it at all.
No, that's just a perfect example. I've done it so many times.
No, so have I in the past. And I've realized just having this allows me to slot and change in different exercises depending what's free. And then another one would be just as well, recipes, for example. If you only know one thing, that's the only thing you can cook. If you can cook multiple different things, when you get to the kitchen and you're like, what am I going to eat tonight? Oh, I know how to cook this, this, and this, and this. Oh, therefore, you have more, you just have more options available to you, and you're more likely to follow through on one of them. I don't know about you, but if I eat the same thing every day, I get bored.
Yeah,
the whole point of learning how to cook different things. And I assume most people as well are like us, and they will go and buy different things in the supermarket. For the week, you don't just eat the same thing every day. Maybe you do. But yeah, for me, it's the same premise. If you have more flexibility and more options, you're obviously going to be able to, I don't know, I was going to say stick to it, but it's just more you feel more free in that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think off the back of that, I think that if you can understand the fundamentals of the area with which your habit is in, then that gives you the expertise to basically be flexible and adapt and maneuver. If you understand the different mechanisms that are in play when you're on using a certain like weight machine, right? Mm-hmm. And you know how gravity works, you know how your muscles work, and then be like, well, I can actually do that doing this. So that machine is like full at the moment. So once you understand the fundamentals of things, it's the same thing with food and recipes, right? If you understand the fundamentals of cooking, well, then you can be like, well, I can also do this, this, and this. And it opens up those options to you. And then you can choose whatever you want. But I think, when you have a basic fundamental understanding, then, it allows flexibility.
It kind of just reminds me, slightly off topic. Well, it's kind of on topic, but it's more from what we've been talking about with the parameters of improvement.
Yeah.
Having multiple areas you can improve yourself. So let's just say we're going to go back to gym here. Let's just say you're doing an exercise. There's multiple ways you can improve that. So you can improve that by lifting heavier. You can improve it by lifting for more repetitions. You can do it by lifting with less rest time. And what that allows you to do as well is also like what we're just saying is like be more flexible. So you go in and you can do something different this time, just by having, just knowing that you can improve in these different areas allows you to be a bit more flexible the way you approach your health and training.
Absolutely.
Lift more. Like, fair enough, you can go in and just lift more every time, but there's also other areas that are also interesting that you can improve.
Exactly. And I to be fair, I found this over and over and over again, that it's almost like a default now, that when I am starting anything new, I go look at, like, for instance, when I started running, I knew how to run, but I didn't know much about running. And then I started looking at like the biomechanics of it and what actually it entails. And so, for instance, I came across the term like cadence, which is to do with how many steps you kind of get in within like a minute. And then that helped me give me another parameter. So it's like, once you understand those fundamentals, you can go off and you can adapt that to you. And once again, making it flexible to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
So today I'm not feeling as strong, or I'm not feeling like I can do it as much. So I'm going to do something different. So for me, for a weightlifting example would be, let's just say I'm tired today. Right. I'm going to reduce the weight. I'm going to do more reps, less rest between. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And that way you still progress, but you've been flexible with the way you approach it, which is like, I can't get over how much this has changed me personally with my gym. Because I don't know about you, but when you get in, you're just knackered. You're like, oh, I don't know if I can be able to lift today. But then there's no excuse when you're like, actually, do you know what? Today, then I'm going to focus on reducing the weight, bringing it down really slowly. So like doing everything way slower, trying to do more reps, doing less rest. You're still doing a great workout, but you've managed to adapt to the situation, because otherwise you just give yourself a sort of like, a card to say, oh, I can't do it today, I'm going to miss it. But it's like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it differently. And you can only do that if you have it up your arsenal. Like the approach you take can be more than one, if that makes sense. So it's not just, I'm going to go there, I'm going to lift heavy. It's like, okay, fine, I can do that, but I could also go there, lift lighter, lift more. Exactly. And you could even do
like having plan A, B, C, and D.
No, literally, this is the premise of this book is literally that. It's, having plans, having alternatives to allow you to, depending upon what the situation calls of you.
And essentially, it's kind of like planning for failure.
It is, yeah.
If I can't achieve this full workout, then I know that I've got all these smaller workouts or these different workouts that aren't as taxing in that area that I'm finding there's conflict with. So
you could even,
go on. No,
I was gonna say you could even call it like implementation intentions. A bit before, like if this happens, I do it. Then it's like, if I'm feeling tired, I then do this.
Yeah.
So you can do it. You can make it very logical, or you can just do it on a whim based upon how you're feeling, and there's no logic to it as long as you've got like options to then choose from. But yeah.
No, it's a good point. I think the only caveat to that would be that you'd have to plan for different contexts or different internal states.
Many different ones. Yeah.
So I reckon you could on a generic level and have them in your pocket, but then now and then. And to be fair, actually, that is kind of what this framework does. You can't plan for every context. But yeah. Okay, so a new dimension of flexibility. So to prioritize consistency means to set your marks low enough that you won't ever miss. It means to make your minimum requirements showing up instead of showing off. Adding flexibility will make your daily goals even more resilient, with higher upside potential in the short and long term. Without flexibility, your goal's strength will merely be situational dependent. The mini habits premise is to try and get the easy wins as soon as possible. And I do really like that kind of situational dependency, as in, if you can only ever perform it in this state or in this context, well, then you're limited. You basically kind of want to make it, independent and dispositional. It's dispositional, right?
Dispositional. Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. Situationally independent, essentially. Yeah.
I like this this bit about the sort of showing up instead of showing off. I mean, we were talking about this before as well, because me and Tristan are both trying to do we do cold showers every day. And I was just saying to him before that I think, when was it? I think it must have been yesterday, actually. I was really feeling, so every day I've been trying to increase the amount of time I stay in the cold shower. And then yesterday it was yesterday. I wasn't really feeling like it. So I was like, do you know what? I'm not going to try and stick myself under a cold shower for a minute. I'm just going to do it for 20 seconds. And I did it. And to be honest, the 20 seconds actually seemed really easy at that point because of the amount of times I've been doing it for a minute. But the point being here is I still got to win, even though it was like, usually I would have just not done it. But by making it small, we've still done it. And I've shown commitment. I haven't missed a day. Yeah. And therefore, I feel good for doing it, even if. And then today I went back and did it for a minute again. So it just goes to show the sort of power of it as well.
Exactly.
I guess it gives you a playbook for what to do when you don't feel like doing it. And it's like, when you don't feel like doing it, what you do is the minimum.
Yeah.
And as long as you know what the minimum is, and as long as it's small enough, there should be no reason why you don't do the minimum. Like,
exactly.
That's the whole point. If it's too taxing to do, even when you're like really tired, that's not the minimum. There's got to be something smaller that you could be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it could even just be actually 1 second. 1 second in the cold shower. That's it. Okay, I'm in the cold. Off.
Exactly. Because the thing is that there is a barrier to action, right? Like, you can think about it all you want, but that's still not really going to do much for those neurological pathways. But when you actually take action towards something, then you are physically using your body to engage in something. And I think even if, like you said, even if you're doing it for one second, it's like that neurological pathway has improved by 1 second's worth of what whatever the action is. But so I think it's incredibly important to just, like you said, show up. Do you want to start us with these flexibilities, these different types of flexibilities?
These are the two different types of flexibilities for your habits. So you have lateral flexibility, means having a variety of ways to reach a goal, or even the option to change a goal in the moment. So hybrid mini habits are habits with an either or win condition, either walk 2 blocks or do 1 pull-up to fulfill your exercise habit. So this is, similar to what we were saying before, which is, let's just say your goal was health. Here, the example they've given for the mini habits are you either walk 2 blocks or you do 1 pull-up, and that fulfills your health goal for the day. So you'd almost have like a bucket. It's like health goal, wealth goal, whatever you could do like that. And then you have these mini sub habits in it, laterally like spread across to be like we said before, go gym, play football, play tennis, all of that can be under the same sort of bracket. And then we have vertical.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Hello. Oh, hello. Then we have vertical flexibility, which is also a really important part. And it reminds me a lot of the token system we were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
But vertical flexibility means having different size goals within the habit. So this allows us to intuitively choose the goal we're most motivated to do today. Meaning we don't need to know the exact timing of motivational stages in goal pursuit. These different size goals correspond to different strengths and weaknesses. For example, take the goal of 100 push-ups. Setting a sub-goal of 10 push-ups at a time instead of the full 100 push-ups has been shown to be more effective at motivating people to action at the beginning because it increased their sense of attainability. But later on, once people believe they are within the reach of the bigger goal, like when they've already done 75 of the 100 push-ups, the sub-goal was less motivating than the bigger goal. When they get within striking distance of the bigger picture goal, their strongest source of motivation changes from attainability to the value from completing the bigger goal. And to be honest, I can speak from experience with the running we've been doing recently.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. So for me, when I'm doing that 12-minute Cooper run, which is where you run for 12 minutes for as far as you possibly can, I'm counting in increments of like quarters. So I'm like, I'm 4 minutes in, that's like a third of the thing. You kind of get what I mean. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it. But then the closer I get to those like last 2 minutes, and it becomes like that's what was then my motivation changed to I need to finish this. So beforehand, I'm just focusing on like keeping the pace for like these milestones of like 3 minutes. I'm like, oh, I've done 3 minutes, cool. Then another 3 minutes, oh, cool. Then at the end, it's like, oh shit, I'm so close to finishing, and that's what spurs me on. And then when I'm finished, like, yes,
no, exactly. And like naturally, like, you know, your motivation is going to fluctuate, just as it does all the time in different scenarios anyway. But that motivation will probably also be based on your attainability, your default, you know, your baseline of achievement or your ability to what you can do. So naturally, if you're building up that baseline of what you can do, let's say you start with the 10 push-ups and you can keep doing that, and then you build it up, then when you are in those kind of motivated states, right, that fluctuate, and sometimes you're in that motivated mood, then you can be like, actually, I could do a fucking 100 today, you know? Yeah. And that's when you can utilize that. You can take advantage of that. And if you already have a plan in place, that plan C for when you're stupidly motivated, then you can achieve it. And you're able to track that, and that's able to, you know, reinforce that kind of, you know, empowerment. And I think that's quite, I quite like the whole vertical flexibility aspect of it.
Yeah. Then you've got this bit, so sort of the goal strength pie. So you have the small, which is very easy to start, not intimidating, suitable for remarkable consistency, and a powerful momentum builder. So this is kind of what we were saying before, like the tiniest possible version of the habit you could do, such as literally just dropping down on the floor and doing a push-up, or, you know, eating one bit of veg or one lettuce leaf of a meal, you know. Then you have the medium. This is not overly intimidating or difficult to start, and moderately satisfying if completed. So there's a well-balanced effort-reward ratio. So this is kind of like, I guess you could say, having a side of veg for dinner. This is more like having, you know, a 30-second. I'm saying veg for my personal. I'm sure there's people who agree with me. I'm sure there's people out there who don't have any sort of issue with it. And then, that would be like a 20-second like cold shower. So something that's, you know, it's tough, but it's not too tough. And then you could say something along the lines of maybe just a gym session. And the point being here, it's something that's, you know, still rewarding. But obviously a lot harder to do than the sort of smaller habit. You got the large, and this is like can motivate us to rise to the challenge, aligns with our dreams, impressive and very satisfying if completed. It's exciting to think about and do. And this is kind of where you're sort of pushing past the sort of like personal best type stuff, or at least that's how I interpreted it. So it's like, I don't know, doing something you've never, like pushing the boundaries of where your performance is at. So I don't know, whether it's lifting the heaviest weight you've done, eating the most amount of, like, literally just having a vegan meal for me would be pretty up there with accomplishment. But this is the sort of thing where you're sort of, it's not common because you're going to have to be highly motivated to do this, but it's where like your sort of pinnacle of success is. And it's important to note that will change depending upon what you've achieved in the past, right? Like once you hit this pinnacle, you're highly likely to need to update it to something that's pushing the boundaries again. Otherwise it's not a worthy goal to hit as a sort of like high habit performance thing.
Exactly. And I think like running is like a prime example, especially if you take like different distances, because if you've just started out and you can run like 1 or 2K, then your elite isn't going to be a marathon, right? It's just not attainable. And so you're never going to do that. And so, you know, you have to be able to establish the differences so that they are attainable, but they're also based on kind of like motivation when you are in those motivated states. And like you said, the small should be so easily attainable that, you know, you're always going to do it, even on your worst day.
And to be honest, this isn't like a fixed formula of small, medium, large. You can even do small, medium, large, extra large, right? You could have large as something more that's like, I don't know, it's obviously harder than medium, but it's not really pushing anything. It's kind of like it's a high performance, but it's not like your personal best. And then you have like an extra large one, which is just like that is creme de la creme. That is like the end goal type thing. If I achieve that, then I've done really well.
Yeah.
But it's such a useful sort of like little sort of way of thinking about it. I think it's
absolutely.
both the lateral and the vertical side of things.
Yeah. And I think, we kind of do it. Like I was saying, we do kind of intuitively do it now and then. It's just, we don't see it as that. We just think, oh, I went to the gym and I felt motivated. So I did a big, I pushed myself. Right. Mm-hmm. But we didn't think about like, oh, it wasn't in that framework of like, oh, that was a big task. Or that was
I've just gone up the sort of vertical ladder. I've been very vertically flexible today. I've gone up, done my large.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just, so it makes sense that there should be a framework for it. And then these last bits, so the goal weaknesses part is so small, it's unimpressive to the point of seeming worthless as individual accomplishments, potentially weak sense of progression if kept small. Medium fails to get the super easy starts and consistency benefits of small goals, not as inspiring and satisfying as larger goal wins, and seemingly muted benefits compared to the other two sizes. And large, often intimidating to the point of paralysis, very difficult to be consistent with, demoralizing when you fail or burn out. And the reason why he's kind of mentioning these weaknesses is that those are our approaches to those sizes, to those habit sizes. And so we naturally will have these certain attitudes towards them. And let's say, I do think, oh, the mini habit's really small, I'm not going to do something like that. Well, then I might be more inclined to choose the medium or the large. And so it works both ways. It's like it takes into account that we naturally will have these views of these small, medium, and large habits, and so we can account for that basically and resort to the others.
Yeah, I thought one of the big points as well here was that, you can also get quite demoralized, let's just say, if you keep sticking to mini habits. So I can't remember if he goes on to it later in the book, but I mean, a pretty good rule, I guess you could create for yourself would be like, don't do the mini habits for more than 3 days in succession, because you probably will get quite demoralized when you realize, all I've done is one press up every day. And then you kind of realize that's, you're getting yourself out of jail there. You're not really, actually doing the habits. You're kind of just like getting by. I mean, once again, we can't devalue the idea that you're still being committed.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where you still have to get past the commitment of the mini. So the whole point of the mini being there is just to allow you, for maybe days when you don't feel 100% up for it, to still keep some level of momentum.
Exactly.
But the whole point is not to stay in the mini habit. It's like that's not the point here at all. Yeah. The point is to use that as a leapfrog, or to use it on days where, in fact, it's almost like an excuse generator. It's a way of excusing yourself on days when you really, really aren't up to it, but at the same time keeping that level of momentum, because you can still tick it off saying, I've done it. That's how I would see it, rather than anything else. It's literally there to just keep you ticking along, saying you've done something. Yeah. It's not there to be, let's just do 30 days of the mini habit, unless of course your mini habit is really big.
No, but that is essentially it. It's like, you have a goal, right? This aspiration of what you want to achieve. You've broken it down into these next actions or these behaviors that you can engage in, right? So whatever those habits are. And then you're basically trying to determine, okay, well, when my motivation is at the lowest, okay, my internal state is at its shittest and life is throwing everything at me, what level is that at? And that's where my mini habit is. And then I can build up from there. Then I can be like, well, okay, well, when I'm motivated, I might do this. And when I'm really motivated, I might do that. And then obviously you naturally build up your ability. So the mini habit gets harder, and so do all the others. But yeah, that's kind of just how I see this whole framework. So the last point here is this is a two-way leverage, because you can reference the large option to make the small option seem easier, and reference the small option to make the larger option seem more impressive. What we were just saying.
Yeah.
Should we move on to part 3?
Yes, you lead.
Okay, so part 3, motivation unlocked through choice. So the 3 motivational sweet spots: attainability, respectability, and greatness. So attainability is a key factor in what motivates us to choose one action over another. That's what we were just saying. And action value is another key factor in what motivates us to take action. And action value is basically is determined by our perceived pain and or reward from doing it. So why are we doing it? Like, what do we want to gain from it? As your goal moves away from easy attainability towards improbability and impossibility, your motivation to pursue it naturally decreases. And that makes sense. It's just kind of exactly what we were just saying.
I was going to say, isn't it funny that when we were talking before this as well about the 12-minute Cooper run and obviously like the 4-minute mile, how you were like you were really keen to run the 4-minute mile, and then you realize it's 24 kilometers an hour for 4 minutes, and then all of a sudden it becomes like, oh wow, that is actually. That's quite, it probably changed the motivation almost instantly, because it definitely changed mine. And then when I saw that only 1,663 people had ever done it, I was like, even more like, fucking hell, like that's, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to, but it's interesting. But that's the effect it kind of has.
Yeah, it's funny. And it is like our natural response to something, isn't it? It's like, there's no way I can attain that, or not yet, unless I put in loads and loads and loads of work. And so I need to make it more realistic to me. So mine would be something far less.
You got to start somewhere else, right? You could just fight a 5-minute mile, right? And then you work your way down from there, right? Something that's like, it's still going to be super challenging, but at least you can sort of imagine yourself maybe running, I don't know what a 5-minute mile would be, but I can assume it'd be somewhere around 22 kilometers an hour for 4 minutes. It's doable, I assume, but it's obviously really tough.
No, exactly. But yeah, so those need to be taken into account. So instead of relying on willpower to do the heavy lifting when using elastic habits, we can choose goals that hit the motivational sweet spot of these 2 factors. Maximum attainability, so small wins, is motivated by the thought, I can definitely do that. Small goals should withstand practically any deterioration in conditions, whether internal or external. They act as a safety net to catch you on your worst day.
As we said before, yeah.
Exactly. Moderate attainability meets respectability. So these are medium wins. And this is motivated by the thought, this is a respectable accomplishment. These can help build up to attempting those large wins. And that makes sense. Like, you're not going to really be able to, like, now and then you can probably do an elite challenge. And to be fair, I do find that, like, when you haven't gone to the gym for a while and your body just has this reserve energy, and you go in, you do like a really good fucking workout, and then the next time you go in, you do something that's like, shit. So yeah, it is possible, but basically you can use those kind of medium wins to kind of build up so that you can do those elite wins more often. And then greatness. So these are the large wins, and these are motivated by the thought, this is a significant victory and an exciting step forward in my quest for greatness. These habits are the most rewarding and desirable, but least consistently attainable. So exactly what we were just saying, pretty much.
Yeah, and I always get a bit confused with this one as well, because I don't really see them as habits. I see them more as like milestones within the habit.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of get what I mean? It's less of a habit. Like, I don't have a habit of going into the gym and doing a specific weight. For me, that's like the habit is the gym.
These are goals
inside the
for
gym.
the
Is like these like goals within the milestones within the habit.
Yeah.
But for me,
habit goals, I guess, would probably be a better way to put it.
Yeah, I take elite as basically being personal bests.
Yeah,
that's how I sort of interpret it. If you can go do a habit, and then whether it's reading, I guess it depends on the habit. But if it's like something related to something where you can measure, doing a personal best is where the elite sort of comes in, at least in my interpretations.
No, exactly. Absolutely. And then the last point he has on this is that when you're having a down day, you're going to climb into the arms of attainability. And when you're frustrated with mediocrity, you're going to respond by fighting hard for large and valuable wins. So exactly what we've been saying so far is that, like, your internal state just constantly fluctuates. And if you already have plans that take that into consideration, then you'll always kind of be winning, because you can leverage the attainability or or motivation. So do you want to take us on to the next bit then?
Yeah, so we've got goal anchoring for two-way leverage. So many habits need to be anchored in a value. However, to establish their value, they need to be compared to something else, a larger version perhaps. So elastic habits leverage an up and down two-way system by being able to compare the small and large versions of the same habit to one another. So a lack of comparison complicates the perception of how easy these behaviors are to do. When we have a medium and large option alongside our mini option, we can look at their size and difficulty and see just how easy the mini habit is in comparison. So, a classic example would be like one press up. The medium could be like 50, 60, and then the elite could be like 150 or something ridiculous. Where you're like, Jesus Christ.
It is a really good point though, because like, for instance, I have a habit tracker. I haven't implemented this to my system yet, but they do just sit on their own. And the only value that they hold is the fact that it's just like, well, I wanted to do the habit, but it doesn't show you in itself the value of that habit, right?
Yeah.
Or like in comparison to what you could do or your full potential. And I guess that's kind of what it's getting at, is that you want to be able to know what is the elite is when I'm super motivated and it's the top thing that I can attain, right? It's like the top, the pinnacle of my performance. And so you just are basically plotting habits along that, or milestones or goals along that kind of like potential from your when you have no motivation or attainability or motivation to your best performance. And yeah, I think that's kind of like it's a nice way to look at it, I think. And when you have obviously more than one habit, you can see where you are on that kind of spectrum.
Well, yeah, I was going to say also, it doesn't allow you to really feel you've achieved something if you've done a habit, but you've done it really well. So for example, let's just say one of your habits was read for 10 minutes a day, or read, I don't know, like a chapter. Or some days you're going to absolutely ace that and you're going to read like, 5-6 chapters, maybe read for an hour.
Yeah.
But the habit system never discerns between a really good effort for a habit and a not good effort. Yeah. And you should feel the sense of reward that, fuck me, I've absolutely smashed reading today. Like I've really done well. And that's what most habit trackers kind of miss. You tick it off, but there should be like a level of like, okay, I'm going to do my habit like normal. Maybe it's, read for 10 minutes. You could be like, okay, I've done it. It wasn't great, but it was still done. Whereas, if you read like half a book in a day, you're going to be like, smash that. That's really good. And that I don't feel like you get that sort of feeling of reward, which you should do from doing something that good. So for example, let's just say one of mine is eat more veg, right? And I always go on about this because I've always found it quite hard.
And you eat a whole salad.
That's kind of that's kind of like the point here. So you can either start off with like a half a plate to the point of like I start with a green salad, then I also have a main course with lots of veg or whatever. But that would be like your habit system doesn't discern between eat some greens vis I've eaten loads of vegetables. And it should, because you should feel rewarded for doing that, and you should be like, I've done a good job. Whereas beforehand, it's just like ticking off, like it feels less valuable. And this is the whole point here. It's like you get the value comes from the comparison, and this is the point. It's like when there's like a levels to this. It's like, I guess it's the same with like video games. Like you earn stuff on like a scale, and the only reason you know something's more valuable than the other things is because there literally is a scale to tell you that the point system means that that's better than this one. If that makes sense. They have like a tag next to it, like this is a legendary weapon. This is a normal weapon, right? You could call your bloody habits the same thing. You could have like legendary habits, these normal common habits, whatever. These like mystic habits. I don't care how you do it. It's the same premise.
Otherwise, it becomes less motivating in itself. If the same, if a hard or a big goal is rewarded with the same thing as a small one, well, then you won't.
Why do it again, right? It's obviously there is you get some pleasure just out of doing it for the sake of doing it.
Motivation is only one aspect of it, isn't it? But
but it's obviously cool to be able to like look down like a month, right, and be like, so I've stuck to all these habits for this month. I've done 25 days out of 30, let's just say, for reading, but 6 of those were like top tier days. And you're like, oh wow, like that's good. And then next month is like, I'm going to want to do 7 top tier days, you know. And the whole point of this whole system as well is you can move the goalposts for the medium habits, for the legendary or large habits. The whole point is you use this to try and progress and get better at these things. depending upon what it is, right? Like, for example, one we both do now, which is flossing your teeth. I really don't know how you get to a legendary level of floss your teeth.
No,
you floss your ears. I don't know how you do, but there comes a roof to some of these habits, right? And that's where I think I like to differentiate with this system. For me, works best with stuff you want to achieve, right? And this is like the whole thing where he started originally, which is, what are your goals? What habits lead to your goals? How can you build a system where there's like levels to these to achieve these goals that you want? Whether the goal is to run a marathon, then you can have all these sub habits which link to it, which link to getting aerobic fitness, let's just say, whether it's playing tennis or it's playing football, whether it's going to the gym and running. And then you're having all these different layers to it as well. You know, one for tennis could be, you know, smack a ball with a mate for like 10 minutes. One could be play a full-on set with a friend, if that makes sense. So like, this is the sort of thing you'll be doing.
Absolutely. And I think what's just interesting is that as you perform these habits over time, your experience of that, they'll become more complex in a way. And so you can start to introduce other maybe like parameters that you didn't even know existed. So like an example would be like, I did a kind of breathing, like the Wim Hof breathing thing. Okay. But you know, there's only so long I can hold my breath, and it's not like I could keep
exhale,
so
inhale.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like I can hold it for 10 minutes. But then let's say I did reach the roof or the ceiling of that parameter, then I can then focus on a different parameter, as in like be more
like sitting on hot coals,
or like
and
sitting
doing it at the same time.
hot coals. Exactly. Yeah, but that's what the point is.
Like, technically good, like anything which changes the environment to where there's like pressures, and then you have to like, you know, it's a bit like what we were saying with the cold shower. So like you can do it on time, but you could also technically do it on like stuff like not tensing your muscles, right? Because tensing your muscles heats you up. So like having a cold shower, but just doing it with like tenseness. Or what else can you do? Putting your head under the water. Like there's so many different things you can chop and change, which makes a task technically harder. And therefore you can progress in those metrics.
Exactly. Exactly. Where did we get to?
I think we got to the lack of comparison. So from a top-down perspective, the larger versions of the habit can be compared to the small and medium versions, therefore making them seem more impressive. Small habits are tempting and easy and reward merely showing up, while the larger versions are empowering, with the middle version acting as a compromise between the two. Having these three options means our choice can be based on our context rather than the rigidness of the habit. Do you feel like you're not doing enough? That's a powerful push to do more and go for a big win. Do you feel like you're getting burnt out and running yourself ragged? That's a great reason to rest a bit and go for the easier win. Do you feel somewhere in the middle? Then push yourself a little, but not much, and find a perfect situation for a mid-range goal. And I really like that point because I personally find myself as well with this whole story I told earlier about this cold shower. So I did a 20-second one yesterday. That made me man up today and do it like a minute one. So I was like, I copped out yesterday. I copped out. I did it, but I copped out. And that was part of the motivation for making me do it. So I feel like maybe if you're really not a motivated person, you'll struggle with this, but I find the mini habits actually work because they do egg me on the next day to be like, you copped out, Jess, come on. You got to get back on the sort of bandwagon here. You got to be going for this mid-range sort of, or just going back to like what you usually do, if that makes sense.
No, exactly. No,
it definitely works. I'm convinced it works because, I mean, it works for me at least. So these three levels are terms mini, plus, and elite for small, medium, and large, respectively. The idea is to make your baseline a win by always being able to achieve the mini habit with anything above that being considered a plus. Okay, So mini still a win, but anything above that's a plus.
No, exactly. All right. Well, then moving on.
You lead with the part 4.
Lovely. So part 4, smarter strategy, superior results. So you should not feel guilty when surprises interfere with your plans. All you need to do is pivot your activity so that you can keep your winning streak alive. Because you can never know what life's going to throw at you or how you're going to feel at this moment or anything like that. You just need to be able to adapt in the moment. Be like, okay, well, I've got loads of plans for this, and so I can respond accordingly. Over time, you can start to strategically move your targets up, down, and sideways while still maintaining that winning streak. So goals inform strategy, strategy informs tactics. So quote here. So do not repeat the tactics which have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. And I think that's from The Art of War by Sun Tzu. He loved the book. I think there were like so many quotes in this book about it, but it's essentially a lot of that book is basically rooted in just being able to adapt. So essentially, you want to adapt to the context by deriving an appropriate strategy, which will inform what tactics you use to achieve success. And that makes perfect sense, right? Like you adapt to the context, and then you're like, okay, how am I going to act in this context? And here's what I can do. Like these are the actual tactics, right? The actual actions that you can implement. Mm-hmm. If you want to mimic someone, look beyond their tactics, as in what they do, and into their strategy, why they do what they do in those specific contexts. I thought that was just an interesting point. Like
that is a good point. It's like if you're going to watch like a professional or something, try and figure out what they're thinking when they're in a context, like how they, I kind of get that. That makes sense. But like, for example, if somebody's like a sales professional, somebody's asked them a really challenging question, how do they react? Like, it's not like what they do, is like why they're reacting the way they do, sort of thing. Because
then you can like start to see how people react to their context.
Yeah, which is what professionals like. If you're a professional or something, it's like you're better at adapting to the context that are familiar within that profession, right? And therefore you become very good at reacting to different like nuances in context.
Exactly. And like realistically, all these people who are, the Warren Buffetts and all these like very successful people, essentially what they've done is they've learnt the fundamentals so well, which are basically all the strategies, okay, in this kind of metaphor. And then they're able to basically call on those or the appropriate strategies based on the context. And then those strategies hold those different actions or those different tactics that you can actually use and implement in that context. And they're just very good at that because they've mastered those concepts.
Yeah, exactly. Through repetition of the different contexts, I guess, as well.
Absolutely. So the ramification of choice. So the 4 pillars of elastic habits, the structure essentially. So the first pillar is elastic habits are to be done every day. The second pillar is elastic habits have a limited number of lateral and vertical success points. There's a point where increased flexibility does more harm than good. The third pillar is elastic habits need to be tracked. And the fourth is have no more than 3 elastic habits at one time. Having too many at one time will divide your energy and focus among them. Very straightforward.
Yeah. And you've got a note here on the dealing with the paradox of choice, because obviously on the second pillar we're talking about where having too much flexibility does more harm than good. So creating multiple targets introduces extra choices into your life, something we usually don't want or need. True. It brings up 2 potential issues called choice paralysis and decision fatigue. So choice paralysis. For example, 175 plus different salad dressings. With a lot of salad dressings to choose from, if you buy one, it's not perfect. And what salad dressing is, it's easy to imagine that you could have made a different choice that would have been better. And what happens is this imagined alternative induces you to regret the decision you made. And this regret subtracts from the satisfaction you get out of the decision you made, even if it was a good decision. There are 2 sub-issues with choice in the modern world: triviality and lack of restraint. Trivial choices, like seeing 20 different varieties of ketchup, frustrate us because we know they usually aren't worth the time and energy it takes to make them. True. Unrestrained choices overwhelm the mind because it heightens our awareness of the fact we probably won't pick the best option. Just keep in mind, even if you pick the worst salad dressing option, if you like it, you still made a good decision. And then we have decision fatigue, which is every decision carries an energy cost. The cost is determined by how difficult the decision is to make. When your goal is rigid, the assumed decision to do the behavior can wind up being more difficult than the decision you make with a flexible goal. Elastic habits account.
No, I was just going to say, I quite like the fact that he did include these in, because when I was reading like up until before this section, I was thinking that. I was like, well, given there are all these choices, why can't I just, like, what if I had 10 different choices and I did all of them, but actually none of them actually become a habit because it's only every 10th time I play football. you know. And I guess, okay, it's hacking into the health area, my health goal or fitness goal. But I was starting to think like, well, I'm not sure how legit this may be, but I kind of liked that he addressed those 2 points.
Yeah. Then we've got elastic habits account for choice paralysis and decision fatigue by smartly limiting the number of choices to 3 and making the habits intuitive and easy to perform. Although too many options can cause choice paralysis and decision fatigue, we also desire variability as it keeps us interested and engaged. Thankfully, the elastic habit system is able to introduce daily variability into the habit building process, therefore giving us a sense of freedom while we also ensure we show up consistently and generate powerful results. So I mean, that's
I thought that. Yeah, it is, and I think like it is interesting though, because when you're doing all these habits, a common theme that keeps popping up in all the books is that they can get boring. We thrive on novelty, we thrive on variability, and that we need something that takes that into account. And if you can introduce some level of variability into these habits, then it kind of overcomes that issue. I thought that was quite loud. Yeah,
for sure. And also similar to what we were saying before, which is, the habit goalpost should potentially move as well in terms of, if you're progressing as well, like if it is based upon goals and you're actually achieving the goals you're setting yourself, your habit should actually change depending upon what the goal is, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say one of your goals is to run a marathon. You create a load of habits around doing more running. Then the marathon's over, so you need to fit in a new goal, a new habit. So this is a very fluid system. It's not the be all end all.
No, exactly. All right, so on to the next bit.
Yes.
Do you want to take it away?
Yes. So part 5, elastic habits fully applied. These the following 7 steps are for shaping your behavior with elastic habits. So step 1, choose up to 3 habits. Choose a habit that is as broad as possible, brackets, e.g. exercise, gardening, or piano, and which connects with your values so you care more about doing it. The specific actions will be revealed when the habit stretches in step 2. Step 2, choose about 3 lateral options per habit. Some habits may have multiple possible behaviors you do not have to utilize them all. Instead, choose the lateral options that fit best with your goals. 3 options are ideal. Fewer options increase focus and decrease flexibility, while more options do the opposite. Time is the universal lateral option. It works for almost any habit. Spend X minutes doing a behavior. However, time is not always the best measurement of progress and may be too vague of a starting point. So I quite like this as well. So when in doubt, think about time.
Yeah.
In terms of with the habits, like time spent in the shower, time spent reading, time spent exercising. I mean, obviously you can do it on different parameters, but basically the point here being, if you're ever in doubt in what to sort of be measuring these habits on, go with time.
Yeah, exactly.
Step 3, choose up to 3 vertical targets for each lateral option. So how to set your elite targets? You set it to a height that is challenging but not too elite, that you're likely to feel discouraged and resort to plus and mini habits all the time. How to set your plus targets? Think of this goal as respectable. Too small and it will swallow up your mini goal. Too large and it will compete with your elite goal. And then how to set your mini targets? 1 minute of activity is the recommended baseline for a mini habit. You need to be able to do it every single day without exception, even on your worst days. If your mini is 1 minute, your plus should be something like 10 to 15 minutes. Plus goals should be somewhere around 3 to 20 times more difficult than a mini goal. And elite goals are usually 2 to 4 times more than the plus goals. It's now got something. Yeah, I mean, once again, this is very like baseline, generic. This is not meant to be the be all end all of the system. I mean, if you're not doing it on minutes,
that is irrelevant.
Yeah. The point being here is it gives you a sort of way to sort of think about this. If you're creating it for specific habits that actually, work with time, then use this sort of as the formula to start with. And then once again, if you really can't stick to some of these things, mess around with the different timings, because no system's perfect. Everybody's different.
Yeah. Exactly.
The system also has 15-day checkpoints, a good time to adjust your goals or keep them the same and try to do better in the next 15 days. he's got a little note here about the beauty of self-correcting goals. By analysing your progress or lack thereof, you can precisely tune your targets. If you miss any days, it means your mini goals are too big and too difficult. If you only get mini wins, make your plus goals smaller. If you get no plus wins, but many elite wins, it could mean that your elite goal isn't hard enough or is too close to your plus win condition. If you get on average a plus win each day, your system is well balanced. I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I think you do have to, and it kind of is that whole, like, you know, how we use a weekly review, a weekly habit review. It's kind of like that in a sense, because you can see from afar the pattern of your behavior and your like success, and then tune it to the pattern of success that you want. Really,
like if you're getting elite every day, that's not an elite.
No, exactly. Unless you're like
you
this
can't be
fucking
elite.
you're running a marathon every day,
or whatever. Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, then you've got step 4. So choosing your cues and commit. This sounds a lot more like the other habit, but real life habits can have more than one cue. Although a habit with a single cue can be clear, simple, and streamlined. Single specific cues can also feel restricting, robotic, and awkward. For example, if you aim to meditate at 5 p.m. and you miss that cue for whatever reason, what happens next? You've missed your one and only cue. So it's fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, most people, I don't know, it depends what you need to meditate, but usually it's just you know, you could pretty much do it anytime. But some habits are better suited for different types of cues, as we kind of know. The daily cue (brackets no cue). This is where you aim to complete your habits any time before you sleep. These lead to improvisation and flexibility, as you don't need to remember when and where you need to do each habit, just that it needs to be done. This is probably, well, it's the most flexible option, but it's probably one of the hardest to actually stick to, because you will come up with loads of different excuses for why you can't do it. And by the end of the day, you'll even be like, oh, well, I'm tired. It's the end of the day. We'll do it tomorrow. So I would least recommend this one, but I think it does work for some specific things. I'm trying to think of one off the top
I guess
of my
it
head.
depends on what like, for instance, I'll have one that is to read, right?
Yes, no, fine.
I need to read a certain amount. And that one I can do at any kind of time in the day, just as long as I do it. Most of the time I do it like before I go to sleep. I read for like an hour or something. But at least that way I can get it in.
I was going to say to you, that's one where you probably do it normally, like you have a certain time you usually do it, but at the same time it still can happen whenever. So maybe let's just say you knew you were going to go, I don't know, to a bar one night and drink, and therefore you probably wouldn't want to read in the evening before bed. Therefore you would then be like, right, I'm going to read at another time.
Exactly.
And they can fit it at any point. Then you've got a morning plan cue. So every morning, set your elastic habit plans for the day, choose a lateral option for each habit, and optionally choose what level of success to achieve. I quite like that. You were speaking about it before in terms of the idea of, if you mentally prepare yourself to do something hard, by the time you get around to doing it, it's easier.
Yeah.
So like if you start the day and you're like, I'm fresh today, I'm going to go elite. And then you just keep telling yourself all day, I'm doing the elite. Eventually, when you get to the time of actually doing it, hopefully you would have managed to sufficiently motivate yourself.
Yeah, because like realistically, when we feel motivated, when we're doing these habits, that is when we perform the elite. But I think we can do it ahead of time and be like, I am going to do an elite today. I am going to do an elite. And you kind of convince yourself so that when you do come around to doing that habit, you're like, okay, yeah, I've accepted. I can do this. It's almost like you've tried to amp yourself up so that your motivation will be high when
it's a little bit like you're like pumping yourself up in the back of your head all day. Yeah.
Like what is like, you know, when people do like a dance or something before like a fitness challenge so that they're getting their energy pumping, like essentially you're just doing the same but for like a habit. Yeah.
Another cue is window cues. So like a time window. So do the behavior in a specific window of time between 3 and 5, let's just say. Then you've got another one, which is just specifically time-based. So do the behavior at the same time every day, such as garden at 3:30. Love that. Action-based cues. So do the behavior immediately following another behavior. Exercise after getting out of bed in the morning is an example of that. So begin with a daily cue, but if that fails, try the window cue. And if that fails, try a specific time or action cue. Only reduce it if you find that you need more structure to get it done. Essentially, by choosing the cues for your habit, you have the freedom in how, when, and in what capacity you do your habit.
Yeah. Which I think is interesting, isn't it? It's just the idea that like you're just trying to have as much flexibility in all areas so that you can adapt to life. But I do think that the cue thing's quite difficult because I think habits literally are triggered by, okay, they may have different cues, but it's very like specific, right? You see a biscuit, I want a biscuit, right? I think sometimes I don't know what the neuroscience would be like behind this, because if you have so many cues, then it probably devalues all of them to a degree, maybe, or making it less likely to act on.
Possibly. I was also going to say the part of the reason why there's a bit of a flaw in this is like when you have these like different options as well, this like lateral and vertical areas of the habits, they also all might have different cues for the different levels, and therefore you can't really create a specific cue for all of them, if that makes sense. Like you can't have a specific cue for a certain thing if it takes 1 minute and then another one which takes an hour, because if it takes an hour and the usual cue is maybe just before work, well, you can't now do the hour thing. So therefore there's like, but this is kind of the point where I think he's put here, which is like start with the daily cue, like just do it in the day, because that gives you the most flexibility. And to be honest, this whole book is just one tome to flexibility in life. Like this guy likes to be flexible and free. So
exactly. And I think there's also like I remember thinking about this when I went for a run, because I had given myself the goal to do a 10K run, and I said that's what I was going to do. And then halfway through, I started feeling a bit tired. So then I fell back down to a 5K, and I was like, oh no, I'm happy with that. So I think the issue with this is that you can like plan ahead of time, but when you're actually doing it, it's sometimes,
I get you. I get what you mean in the sense that it allows you to sort of get out of free jail card, whatever you call it, where it gives you almost like that, what we talked about. What book was it? The Moral Licensing, or whatever, or not the Moral Licensing, but like it's one of those like tricks of the mind, where because you now have a lower option, you can cop out of some of the harder challenges because you've actually got a backup. Whereas, for example, like, when I was I was telling you earlier about the 12-minute Cooper run for me, and I had it in my head, I'm doing this. Like, there wasn't even like a fallback. It was like, I'm sticking. And there's something to be said for having that, because if I didn't have that, you're right. If I had something in my mind, which is like, I could have like a mid attempt. So like, let's just say I'm going to attempt this goal. Here's my mid attempt. Here's my top tier attempt. And then because I already have a mid attempt in my head, I can then justify it by being like, oh yeah, I can just settle back on my mid attempt.
Exactly.
And you lose motivation that way.
And realistically, our brains want to conserve energy. So when we are doing an action and it is requiring energy, and we said that we're going to meet an elite or do like a plus, and we know we've got another option, then our brain will start to justify doing the smaller option. And so I think, it's difficult to get round when you're like literally doing the action and you have something to feel.
That's just, I think for me, it's a big one of like training your mentality and like really wanting the thing you want to do. So one of the things I've tried to do and I incorporate in my life, and it's not relevant to this book, but it's like, if I tell myself something like that, which is like, oh, let's settle for this, I then immediately go extra. I try and train myself to immediately go. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say I'm doing an exercise and I'm doing it for 4 sets. I'm on the 3rd set. I'm like, oh God, I'm feeling so tired. Maybe I should just stop at 3. I then go and do 5. Because I'm trying to say to myself, like, fuck you. You're not getting out of this. And even if it's a lighter weight, I don't care. I'm going to surpass it now. So I reduce whatever it is. Fine, it's hard. I reduce it, but I'm now going to get past the point of where I wanted to be, because I'm trying to say to myself, no, you can't accept this. You can't just accept this middle tier. If that makes sense. Yeah,
it's essentially one of those
personal training.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about in the habit blueprint, is that those mini planned actions, so that when you have that loophole,
it's exactly that. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm not gonna do this, or I'm gonna do the smaller version, and it's like, no, if I do that, I do this.
Exactly.
And I
you're
guess
basically
you could
punishing
do
that negative voice, right? So basically, whenever that negative voice comes in your head, you're going to be like, oh, fuck, you've just screwed me now, because now I'm going to have to do more. So like, if you have a talk in my head and tell me to stop, I'm going to have to do more than I originally planned. And
exactly.
I mean, I have to say, it's not a foolproof strategy. I'm not claiming to be like, I do it every time. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to get into the sort of like process of doing it. And then you feel even better though. Because you feel like, I've just overcome myself, which is obviously one of the hardest things to do, because it's so easy just to be like, I'm tired, I'm going to stop.
Yeah. And I guess, to be fair, the motivation to do a plus or an elite, if it's just in the moment, then it's kind of a bit abstract. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm doing a plus, I'm doing an elite. That seems good. But actually, I wonder if you start to be more motivated to hold yourself to your choice if you can see progress over a long time. So, for instance, if I can compare it to last week and I did this many elites or this many pluses, then it's like, okay, well, now I've got a reason to stick to it. Whereas, like, if it was just in the moment, it was like, oh, I'm going to do an elite. It doesn't really matter if I do a plus or a mini.
Okay.
Because you can see.
Are you saying like guarding? You've got guarding the amount you did.
And you're kind of, because you can see your progress, it's more motivating. There's more motivation to stick to your goal, to in fact, your choice.
I can see that. You could,
because if, for instance, I did 6 elites last week and I've done 6 elites this week, and I've told myself to do an elite now, I'm probably more motivated to stick to it because I'm going to beat it, right? I'm going to get to that 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess alternatively, if you'd only done 4 and this was your last time to get it to 5, you're more likely to sit down to just a plus because you're like, oh well, it doesn't matter. But this is once again where you have to have this from the habit blueprint, sort of like training to yourself, where you realize your own excuses. And like we can't tell the people who are listening their own excuses. You know your own excuses. The whole point is you become familiar with the same things you say again and again, and you create sort of scenarios where you're like, if I'd use this excuse, I do this instead.
Yeah.
That's the best. That's the only way I think you can get past that, because that's just something that's going to happen to everybody. Like, once again, the system is not foolproof. It's just meant to sort of help with motivation.
Yeah.
And then we've got step 5. We'll go back and retrack just step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So one sec, because we kind of went off topic. So step 1 is to choose 3 habits. Step 2 is to choose 3 lateral options per habit. Step 3 is to choose up to 3 vertical targets for each lateral option. Step 4 is choose your cues and commit. Step 5 is display your habits. So you need to make sure that you can see your elastic habits in a habit tracker in plain sight. This will not only make it easier to track, but also act as a means of motivation, as we kind of just discussed with the whole idea of, I've done 6 elites last week. And then obviously if you're on 5 this week, you go like, shit, I need to, keep up with what I did last time.
Yeah.
Step 6, which is linked to the other one, track your habits. We have 3 levels of success, meaning we need 3 different kinds of notation. So he recommends color-coded stickers: green for mini, silver for plus, and gold for elite, as using numerical values such as 1, 2, and 3 can give the mini level an inferior appearance when in reality it's the most important. And then step 7, score and evaluate your performance. And this is where it actually gets quite interesting. Because we, in one of our previous reviews of the habit blueprint, we talked about a token system, which is very similar to this.
Yeah.
So the tracking calendar's last page contains a scoring sheet where you can compare month-to-month scores overall and by individual habit. So mini, plus, and elite wins are worth 1, 2, and 3 points respectively. Bonuses can encourage and reward you for overachievement. So here's a list of, like, once again, this is just his version of the system. You can create your own system, but he uses this. So special achievements, double down, brackets 1 point. So you meet the elite requirement twice over in 1 day for 1 habit. Perfect day, brackets 2 points, any day with all elite wins. Hot streak would give you 3 points. So any streak of 3+ consecutive elite wins for 1 habit. And unfreaking believable 5 points for any streak of 7+ consecutive elite wins for 1 habit. And then
essentially, it's what you were talking about in terms of like making a life gamified, right? You're giving it like XP, and it's like this is basically just saying like a combination of elite plus and elite mini wins. But essentially, you can reward yourself. It may be abstract, but then, like we were talking about with the kind of token system, then you could exchange that for real rewards.
What you should really also do is write down a bunch of things you want to do, want to buy, and then assign a point score to these things, depending on how expensive they are or how much time they take or whatever. And then you use your habits as a way to purchase these things. Obviously, like we said before, you don't just walk up to a shop and go, "Can I exchange my 15 habit points for But the whole point
I got
being
3 elites this week.
You're allowing yourself to spend the money because you've achieved something.
Yeah.
And
all of that, it's like I think it's important to reiterate that literally is telling your mind that this is something that it should focus on, that it's something that it should attribute energy towards. And effort towards, because when you give it a reward, even when we were talking about like doing a tiny little habit and just going yes to yourself, something as small as that, something as big as like,
I actually did that at the end of my run today as well. I did like I was like, yeah.
Love it. But exactly, it's you're reinforcing this habit by whatever kind of reward you're giving yourself. And those can vary in multiple different ways, but yeah.
Yes. And then, he's also added some other scoring things you can do. So you can do like the 15-day period. You could do obviously a bi-weekly one. You could do a weekly one. You could do a monthly one. Yeah. Here being something like you give yourself an extra 3 points for getting 10 elite wins for a habit in the period. 10 points for getting 23 plus total elite wins. Obviously we're throwing out a load of stuff to you. If you want to see this, we'll put the book summary up afterwards so you can see this and take it if you need it. But the point being here is less about the actual scores and more about the fact that you're actually assigning scores and you're assigning bonuses, and you're going to keep track of this and you're going to measure this up and you're going to see your progress. You're going to see your total like achievement score every month. And the whole point is you're going to give you a self of like the baseline of where you're at, what you're performing. And then obviously from then on, it's like, I need to beat this. Yeah. And you need it in a system where you can obviously count it all up and you can possibly see a little like total achievement count. So like the total amount that you've done so far this month, then can see also the previous month as like a sort of like where you were last month. Right. And me and you are going to try and work quite hard on creating an actual notion for this, I think, because it'll be quite useful for people.
Absolutely.
To create something around this, because it'd be really useful, I think.
But you can see your visible progress, right? And that's, I think, in itself like really motivating. I think it will be quite like, I'm quite excited to try and implement it to notion database and see how it goes.
I want to get into the habit now as well of whenever I want something, my first not like food, more like a physical item, like something I want to buy, like whether it's a video game, whether it's, I don't know, a book or whatever, just put it in this like I want to buy section, and then assign it certain things and be like, I can only get this if I do this. And therefore you teach yourself that you have to earn the things you buy, because obviously it's so easy just to be like, I got money in my bank, I can just buy it. But
it's a good point.
But it should be, because also like, I don't know about you, but if I want something, it kind of goes through my head quite a lot. Like there's a shirt I really want to buy, right? And I still think about it now, and it's like I should be assigning that to something I do instead of just because I could buy it now. Yeah, but it doesn't. And fair enough, you can argue, but you earn that money through like working or whatever. But it still doesn't. I feel like there's more to it if I can think about this thing as I'm doing all these like habits or exercises and stuff, and like going, I'm working towards it. And then when I finally get it, I'm going to be like, oh, do you know what? I got that through actually doing all these like 12-minute Cooper runs, for doing all this stuff, and almost do it as like a monthly end of month reward. So at the end of every month, you sit down and go like, right, now we're going to go through my system, see how much points I got, and see what I can exchange for my list of things I want. And then all you do is every month you spend all your money at the end of the month when you've got new money coming in, and it works out perfectly for you. It's like
exactly. I think it is. It's there's two sides of the coin. One, it incentivizes you, right? Like when you're doing those elites, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this so that I can get that new game or that new shirt. But also, as like a byproduct of that, when you get that shirt, you feel like you've properly earned it.
Yes,
as in like, and everything feels so much better when you put more effort into it. Like think about like when you put have a dinner party or something and you've cooked all the food and then you sit down and you have it with everyone. It's much better than like just getting a delivery. You put the effort into it, and I think it's a good way of going about getting things actually. Yeah.
It's something that I can see the massive value in, and it's something I do want to incorporate into my life personally. I think I don't know about yourself, but I often buy things on a whim, and I shouldn't do it because I should actually. It's also a good habit to stop yourself from spending as much. Whereas like I'm going to buy this, but no, I'm not. I'm going to put it into this side bit where I can choose at the end of the month depending upon how many points I get to buy it.
Yeah.
And only then can I buy it.
Yeah.
And then it also allows you to really like think about it. Do I actually still want it at the end of the month? But maybe no, I don't.
Yeah. No, exactly.
You can do it in any way, right? You could do it. You could do it as right. You could say to yourself, "I'm going to get to the end of the month, and I'm going to exchange." You could do it in a token system, whereas like each thing you want to buy has a specific number of points to it. Or you could just be like, "Look, if I hit my target, I get to buy 3 things of my choice, and that's it." You have a list of 10, 3 of them I get to buy this month. Yeah. And it doesn't matter about price; it's just I just get to choose which 3, or 2, whatever. It's a flexible system. It's based upon what the individual wants.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So that was Elastic Habits. There are some advanced tactics that we're probably not going to talk about in this episode, but you'll be able to find it on the book summary on our website. Yeah. I thought anything you want to add?
No, I just want to nothing really. I just think use some of the tools you talked about. So this idea of vertical and lateral habits wisely, assign a scoring system to it. And yeah, not really much else to add. I think we covered pretty much everything. Yeah. And I would like to also add, you should probably use this in tandem with all the other stuff we've been reviewing with the other habit books, with the 4 laws of behavior change. Like just because you're using the system doesn't mean you shouldn't include these other tips and tricks that actually get these habits started as well. Yeah. So it's just, for me, it's all to be used together to create like a complete habit system that, isn't going to fail you.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what we're going to try and do.
No, exactly. I think this book doesn't talk so much about like the mechanisms that underpin habits, in terms of, like you just said, the 4 laws, the neurochemistry, all that kind of stuff. But when you add that in, then it just makes all those habits, first of all, easier to do. You can control the cue, the craving, reward, and then you can also build this kind of system, whether it's like a token economy.
I was going to say he kind of touched on a lot of those. Like he did touch on the queue. He kind of created this new reward system. So it's like through this point, the point system in my head is a reward system.
It is.
Then I guess he didn't really talk much about making the environment easier, more conducive to doing it. But he did obviously talk a lot about reducing the habit to like the smallest possible action you can take, which is obviously it's one of the key things you see across all the habit books. They all say the sort of similar thing to that. So I also want to say the book was kind of aimed at people who already knew a little bit about habits. I felt like I got that feeling. Assumed that people were already interested in it, because I feel like he even quoted Atomic Habits near the front. I want to say he did, but maybe I'm completely wrong. Like he even mentioned it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, maybe he did. I can't remember.
But either way, I don't really have anything else to add. That's it.
Sweet. Okay. Well, that's a wrap. Hey guys, well there you have it. We hope you enjoyed that book summary. Now we know it can be a lot to take in all at once, so if you want to be able to read this in a more palatable size, or you want to be able to implement any of those key actionable ideas that we were talking about in this episode, head on over to our website at wisewords.blog, where the book summary will be waiting for you. Also, don't forget to check out our socials, as we consistently upload the key ideas, benefits, and actionable ideas from all the books that we read. The links to those will be in the description below. Now, we want to be able to get you the best content in a way that's really easy to understand, but we need your help. Your opinion matters. So you are our feedback mechanism. And with those quick actions, whether that's leaving us a like or a dislike, commenting in the comments section below, or subscribing to our channel, all of those help us gauge what we're doing well and how to improve on our method of delivery. So if you have any thoughts on the matter, don't hesitate to act. It takes less than 10 seconds and it really helps us out. But with all that being said, until next time, stay wise.